As long as I can remember, I have always been fascinated with villains, like in TV shows or movies or books, villains or bad guys. Even as a kid, I loved Batman. It's my number one. And to be honest, that love is still just as strong today as it ever was. I still love Batman. My son loves Batman. If you ever ask him, he will dress up in a Batman costume, and he will talk like Batman. It is the funniest thing. When he puts it on, he's like, "Hey, how you doing?" Like, it's awesome. I love Batman, but I've always loved and enjoyed watching the Joker more. Just even as a kid, I remember being like, I like the Joker. I'm kind of scared of clowns. I don't know if you knew that, but I am actually scared of clowns. And so something fascinating to me about the Joker, I've always liked that. As a kid, I loved wrestling, like WWE wrestling. Some of you like that as a kid. Some of you like it as adults. That's fine. But as a kid, I remember a lot of people liked Hulk Hogan and The Undertaker and those kind of people. But I like the bad guys. I always just kind of liked the NWO and those kind of bad guys. And then even as I've gotten older, I still enjoy bad guys and villains. Movies and shows I like, if they have a really good villain, I like it. One of my favorite shows of all time is Breaking Bad, and the reason why is because it is watching a guy turn into a villain. I just enjoy villains. So this week, I was looking up why. I'm not alone in this. A lot of people just tend to be more interested in the bad guy versus the good guy. And so I was looking it up, like, is there a psychological reason why that happens? What's the reason behind this? And here's what I found. Here's on the one article I read on the internet, and I'm sure it's 100% true because it's one article on the internet. Okay, but here's what they said. We like villains because they're unpredictable. The heroes normally win, they normally survive, but villains, you don't know that. You don't know if they're going to make it at the end, so they're kind of unpredictable. And their actions, you don't know why they're actually doing their actions. The good guys do it because they're good. The bad guys, you don't really know, so they're a little unpredictable, so people like that. We're curious about villains. We like to know why. We all like to know why people do things, even if you listen to a crime podcast or a real-life documentary of someone that does something horrific. We like to know why. We like to we're fascinated with that. And what they really said is the reason is because villains are more realistic. Because we all know, deep down inside of us, all of us have the potential of doing something bad and at times being bad. Where heroes, they come across as perfect, and we all know we're not perfect. Where villains is like, well, I can kind of relate to them a little more because I do bad things all the time. I understand why that happens. They aren't perfect. In the Christmas story, there is a villain. And this villain really existed in history. He was a real person. And this villain was a bad person who acted out of selfish ambition. And this villain is more like us than a lot of us like to think. And for those of us that we've been doing this series called Still Stuck, for those of us who feel a little stuck in our faith right now, I believe if we learn about the villain of the Christmas story, that we can really find out how we relate to him and what it means for us in our faith that might seem stuck. Mary was a young, engaged girl from this nowhere town called Nazareth. At this point, she's probably on Pinterest trying to figure out her centerpieces for her wedding. That's what she's thinking about. Joseph hasn't thought about a centerpiece ever in his life. Mary, since she was a baby, was thinking about the centerpiece for that dream wedding one day. So she's on Pinterest trying to figure this out, and all of a sudden this angel shows up named Gabriel, and he makes this announcement. So we know the story, but we always think this announcement is simply just a birth announcement. Here's Jesus is going to be born. That's what we normally think of this announcement. But it's so much bigger than that. Here's what it says in Luke chapter 1, verse 30. But the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary. You have found favor with God. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus." The name Jesus here is derived from the Hebrew word Yahshua, Y-A-H-S-H-U-A-H. So Yah is for Yahweh, stands for Yahweh. And then Shua stands for Yeshua, which means to save or to rescue. So the name Jesus can be translated to God rescues. That's what it can be translated to, the name Jesus. This means that this Jesus person who's about to be born is God actively caring about you and actively going about rescuing you. That's what it means. The angel continues in verse 32. "He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over Jacob's descendants forever. His kingdom will never end." There's so much imagery in this verse that a lot of times we just read it really quick to get to the barn part, the manger part, the actual birth. But there's so much imagery in here. First, it says the Most High. That is royal language. You're only talking about kings and royalty when you say the Most High. Then it says the throne of David. The Israelites would know who David is. David was the most famous, most popular king of all time. And here he's compared to the throne of David. He uses the word reign. You know who reigns? Kings reign. Kings reign. And what do they reign? His kingdom. There's so much imagery of royalty and kingship in this announcement. See, Mary wasn't just giving birth to a baby. She was giving birth to a king. It's important to understand that. Jesus was not born as a religious figure. He wasn't born as a prophet. He wasn't born as a teacher. He was born as the king. That's who he was born as. That's who he is today. But for many of us, we don't look at Jesus as king. We look at him in different ways. Here are some of the ways I've found that we look at Jesus. We have Jesus, the backup plan. He's the backup plan. I heard a stand-up comedian talk about believing in God, and this is a comedian who's an atheist, and here's what he said about believing in God. He says, because I don't believe there is a God, I really hope there isn't a God. If you don't believe in a God, you better hope there isn't, because that's a bad thing to be wrong about. Being wrong the other way isn't really a problem. If you believe in God and you're wrong, then you don't really have a problem. It gave you comfort during your life, and you end up the same place everybody else does. That's an atheist talking about, hey, and I fully understand what he's saying, and I would even agree with that. But for a lot of us who believe in Jesus, we actually act the same way. We go, well, I'm not sure if I really believe. Just in case, I'm going to just mark off Christian in my survey. I'm going to go to church on Easter and Christmas time. I might even get baptized just in case. I'm not sure if I actually believe it, and the rest of my life doesn't reflect that I believe it, but just in case at the end of my life there is something happening, I want to make sure I'm on the safe side. So I'm just going to say, you know what, that's me, yeah, I believe in that too, even though the rest of my life doesn't matter. For you, Jesus is just a backup plan. He's not changing your life. He's not changing how you live. He's not affecting your life at all, besides the fact that if there is a God and there's something after this life, at least I'm safe, because he's my backup plan. That's how a lot of us look at Jesus. There's also Jesus the cleaner. If you have 3 kids or more, you know this, but no one taught myself and my wife this. When you have more than 2 kids, you are just always cleaning, or your house is a disaster. Like, if we don't do laundry and the dishes every single day, it's not like there's some dishes. It is so many dishes that are left in our sink. And then it's like, well, that's just a disaster. And then by the time we do those dishes, it fills the entire dishwasher up. Now that runs. And the next day is like, well, I don't feel like emptying that right now, so I'm going to just put it in the dish. And then you see the cycle. You guys know it. If you have kids, you know that. Laundry is nonstop at our house. There's always a pile at our house. It gets done when either I do it or my mother-in-law comes over and she does it for us because she loves us that much. So we're like, can you babysit, please? Because we have a lot of laundry to do. So when you have 3 kids, if the only way our house would stay clean is if my wife and I followed our kids into every room they went into and said, all right, I'm going to pick that up for you. You got that? Or let me clean that off for you. Oh, you good. You're doing applesauce on the couch. Oh, it just happened to get all over the couch. I'll clean that up for you. That's the only way our house would stay clean at this point. We would have to follow and be the cleaner. Some of us see Jesus the same way. You see Jesus is constantly following you as you make your mess in life, expecting him to clean it all up. Whoops. Little sin here, let me get that for you. Oh, there's a sin over here, let me clean that sucker up for you. Oh, yeah, you messed up here, but I'll just take care of that for you because I did die on the cross for you. So let me just clean that up for you. And you're just like, hey, thanks, Jesus, keep following me because I'm going to do a lot of sinning. So keep on, stay with me so you can clean it all up for us. Look, Jesus didn't come just so he could clean all of your mess. Jesus came to be king. That's what he came to do. And then the last way we see Jesus the BFF. He's my best friend. That's who he is. As a pastor, I know a lot of worship songs. I've heard a lot of worship songs in my life. There's some songs I really, really love, and there's some songs that, even though they're worship songs, that I despise. And if you've been here for a long time, you've never heard them because I won't let Frank play them. Here's a couple ones I don't like, and if you've been in church world, you may know these. If you're new to church world, you won't know any of these, and thank God, don't look them up, okay, because they're not good, okay? There's a song called I Am Free. Anyone know that song? Here's the chorus, I am free to run. Oh, there's an echo, but you guys are scared. Okay. Don't like that song all that much. There's another one called Like a Lion. Some of you might know that one. The chorus of that one goes, I haven't heard it in a while, that God is living on the inside, roaring like a lion, That's the chorus of it. And the first time I heard it, I was like, it's not bad. And then my brother said, yeah, every time I hear it, though, I think roaring like a lion. So then every time I heard someone sing that worship song, I thought my brother roaring like a cat. So that song was done for me the rest of my life. I can't worship to that song when I see Shane in my head roaring like a cat every chorus. But here's my least favorite worship song I've ever heard in my life, and you may know it. It's called I Am a Friend of God. If you don't know it, let me tell you the lyrics of the chorus. I am a friend of God. I am a friend of God. I am a friend of God. He calls me friend. And I always imagine that part. It's like, come friend. Listen, God is a creative God, and I truly believe we insult him when that's our chorus of our worship song. Like, he is a creative God, and that's all we got? I'm a friend of God, I guess. What else should we say? I don't just say it 4 times. It's like, what about the last one? It's like, well, let's just reverse it a little bit and still say the exact same thing. I am a friend of God. Oh, man. But I get it. We are invited into a relationship with Jesus. He cares for us. He loves us. I get where we're going with this. I get that relationship part. But here's what we need to understand. Jesus didn't come to be your BFF. He didn't come so that you could have a heart necklace that's half of a heart and he wears the other one. You guys walk side by side along life. That anything comes up, you guys are together all the time. He didn't come for him to walk beside us. He's the king. We follow him. To us, we follow him because he is the king. That's who he is. You can only follow Jesus when you acknowledge he is king. That's it. There's no other choice. He didn't give you another choice. He came on Christmas as king. He lived his ministry as king to introduce his kingdom of surrender, his kingdom of putting others first, his kingdom of love. He didn't give us a choice. I'm either king or I'm not. And today, he still reigns as king. You can believe Jesus is your best friend. You can believe he's your backup plan. You can believe he's your cleaner. But Jesus doesn't care about what you believe. Jesus wants you to follow. And you can only follow him when you acknowledge that he is your king. You have to follow King Jesus. That means that Jesus is in charge. That means that Jesus commands obedience. That means that Jesus gives us orders and we live our life with his orders, with his purpose in mind. The villain of the Christmas story truly understood who Jesus was. He understood that Jesus came as king. He just didn't like it. So in Matthew, if you have your Bible, you open up to Matthew chapter 2, or your Bible apps will be on the screen as well. Matthew chapter 2, starting in verse 1, here's what it says. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born the King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." King Herod was a real person in history. He's also known as Herod the Great. He ruled in Jerusalem from 37 BC to 4 BC. So not a super long reign there. He was also called the King of the Jews. He would call himself that. Other people would call him that. Matthew says that when Jesus is born, these magi show up to visit. These magi are most likely court advisors from different kingdoms. And a couple things, I hate to destroy all of your nativity sets, but they weren't kings. They were court advisors. There weren't 3 of them. There was probably 30 of them. We don't really know. All we know is there was 3 gifts, so that's why we have 3 of them. And at this point, they saw the star, but they didn't follow the star. You know, we know that? Because they went to the wrong place. The star came up and said, oh, the king is born. We're going to go where kings are. That's Jerusalem. So they go over to Jerusalem because that's where kings are born. They get there and they ask, hey, where's the king of the Jews? We saw the star. The prophecy said that he was going to be born, so where's the king? And Herod's like, well, you're not here for me, and I didn't have a son recently. So what are you talking about? And here's how it continues in verse 3. When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. He would have been disturbed if it was just a rabbi that was born. There's plenty of rabbis. That's fine. He wouldn't have been disturbed if it was a teacher. There's plenty of teachers. Who cares about another teacher? He wouldn't even be disturbed if it was a prophet. Yeah, there's prophets. Yeah, sure. There's another prophet. But this is a king. And if a king is born, then that threatens his reign, threatens his son's potential reign. When this king being born, that's threatening to who he is, so he's disturbed about it. Verse 4, when he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. Herod here, he's not dumb here. He gets the priest and he starts asking where the prophecy says the Messiah is going to be born. He's like, if there's a king that was born, I want to find out where this king is. So Messiah is translated to anointed one. The Greek word for Messiah is Christ. That's why we call Jesus Christ. But I want you to make sure you understand something. Christ is not his last name. Christ is his title. A lot of times we let the person identify the title, but it's the opposite. Christ means he is the anointed one, the king. King Jesus. It's not Jesus, it's Jesus the Christ. That's who he came to be. Jesus is the Christ. He is the king. He is the appointed one by God to establish his kingdom here on earth, a kingdom not of this world. So the priests tell Herod this in verse 5. In Bethlehem in Judea, they replied, for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. Why does he want to know where the star appeared? Why does he know when it appeared? Because he wants to determine roughly how old the king is. He wants to figure out the age. You see, Herod believed. He believed he was the king. He truly did. He believed that Jesus was king. He just wasn't going to bow down to him. He believed it. He just wasn't going to surrender to the king. Yeah, he's king. He's just not going to be my king. I'm going to make sure he's not my king. See, when a king is born, you have to choose. You have to choose whether you are going to follow the king, whether he's going to be your king, or whether he's not. That's your choice. If you know the rest of the Christmas story, you know what King Herod does. He finds out where the king is born, roughly how old he would be. He decides, all right, I'm going to kill every son 2 years or younger in that area. I'm going to get rid of him. Because if the king's born, I don't want him around. I'm going to take care of him. I'm going to get rid of him. He believed Jesus was king so much that he would do whatever it took to stop his reign. You see, Christmas is the celebration of the birth of a king. The question for today, is he your king? That's what Christmas is, the celebration. We are celebrating the fact that a king was born. But you need to ask yourself, is he your king? Some of you may think, yeah, sure. Jesus is king. Yeah, sure, that's fine. I believe that. Why not? I mean, Kanye did an album called Jesus is the King. I'm fine with it. Like, yeah, I believe it, sure. But here's what we need to understand, and here's what a lot of times we miss, and I miss this at times too. Jesus is only your king if you surrender to him. That's it. You can say he's your king, but if you don't surrender to the king, then he's not your king. Jesus is the king that invites us. He never intrudes. He invites you to participate into his kingdom of good news. And the only way to participate in his kingdom is by surrendering your will to the king's will. That is how you participate. Jesus invites you. He's not going to make you. He's the king, but he's not going to make you follow him. So you want to be part of this? You're going to follow me, and we're going to establish our kingdom. And here's what the kingdom is for. It's for everyone else. You're going to love everyone else in a radical way that people are going to be amazed at the love you have. That you surrender your will and your desires and yourself to deny yourself every day to follow me. That's the kingdom that we're going to establish. If you want to follow me, that's where I'm going. Pick up your cross because I'm going to die. You're going to die to yourself. That is the kingdom I'm establishing. If you want to follow the king, that's what the kingdom does. It isn't about us anymore. It's about his glory, about his praise, about his name. So we surrender ourselves and we give up our rights to follow the king. C.S. Lewis is one of the most famous Christian authors that's probably ever lived. He used to be an atheist, and he started to kind of dig into faith, and he started to realize that he believed in it. And some of the books he's read. If you've never read Mere Christianity, I recommend you buy it, read it, then read it again, then read it a couple more times, okay? Because it's one of the best books I've read when it comes to just discovering your own faith and why you believe it. He wrote another book called The Case for Christianity. This book actually was a radio talk that they record into a book, so it's kind of hard to find. You can find a lot of the passages. And I read this long quote this week, and it kind of helped me with my entire sermon. I started with this quote and went from there. And what I did, if you have your impact cards, everyone pick up your impact card. On the back, normally we give you ways to apply the sermon the whole week. But instead, I decided to just write the entire quote down for you to keep. Okay? I know this is a busy week. Christmas season's coming up, so I want to just give you this quote. I'm going to read this quote to you. And I want you just to allow this verse and what C.S. Lewis is saying to really just dig into your soul. That's what it did for me. Talking about the king. And here's what it says. You can follow along with me on your paper. C.S. Lewis says this in The Case for Christianity. But I wonder whether people who ask God to interfere openly and directly in our world quite realize what it will be like when he does. When that happens, it's the end of the world. When the author walks on the stage, the play is over. God is going to invade, all right, but what is the good of saying you are on his side then, when you see the whole natural universe melting away like a dream, and something else, something that never entered your head to conceive, comes crashing in? Something so beautiful to some of us, and so terrible to others, that none of us will have any choice left. For this time it will be God without disguise. Something so overwhelming that it will strike either irresistible love or irresistible horror into every creature. It will be too late then to choose your side. There is no use saying you choose to lie down when it has become impossible to stand up. That will not be the time for choosing. It will be the time when we discover which side we really have chosen, whether we realize it before or not. Now, today, this moment is our chance to choose the right side. God is holding back to give us that chance. It will not last forever. We must take it or leave it. Jesus came to be king, your king. You have a choice to surrender to the king or not to surrender. You could be like Herod and refuse to surrender. You will choose to reject the king that came and is still reigning today. Here's what you don't have. You can't choose whether you believe he's king or not. He's king. What you say has nothing to do with it. What you think doesn't matter. When we're all long gone, he will still be king. You don't have a choice on whether he is or isn't. You have a choice whether you surrender to him or not. That's your choice. And some of us have spent too long just believing in Jesus as our cleaner, as our backup plan, as our friend, and not saying, you know what, I'm actually going to surrender, which means what I want is gone now, and it's all about following the king. If he tells me to live this way, I'm going to live this way. Even if I don't like it, even if I don't necessarily agree with it, I'm going to live this way because that's what he called me to do. If he said to spend time with him, I'm going to spend time with him. If he told me to obey, I'm going to obey because he's the king. What other choice do I have? Hey, you can believe that Jesus is your cleaner and your friend and not follow anything. You can do that all the time. But he didn't come to be your friend. He came to be your king. And he invites you as the perfect king that loves you so much. He invites you into a relationship with him. He doesn't force you. He gives you the free will to do it. He doesn't invade it. He invites you, says, listen, because I'm the king and I love you this much, I'm going to do everything I can to make it possible for you to be with me. You don't have to be perfect anymore. You don't have to be good enough anymore. I'm going to give my son as a sacrifice to you. And because of that sacrifice, we can have a relationship with the king. We can enter into his kingdom. But you have to choose. You have to choose whether he's actually your king or not. Can we pray together? Dear God, we just thank you that you are the God who is king. You are the God who reigns over us, who is in control. You are the God that's bigger than us, that has a plan for us. God, I pray that this Christmas season and this Christmas story that we all know so well, that today be one of those days where we say, you know what? I'm going to deny myself like you called me to. God, I pray for the people in this room. I pray for the people in this room that need to be convicted, that you convict them right now to surrender their will to yours. God, thank you for being the King who loves us so much that you sent your Son to die for us so that we can now have a chance to reign in your kingdom, to be in your kingdom, to follow you. Not because we're good enough, not because we are perfect, but because you're good enough. Thank you for the grace that you have poured out on us. Today we surrender to you, the King who is alive today. In your Son's name, amen. Amen. Well, I want to encourage you to come back on Friday for Christmas Eve service. Again, 2 services, 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock. I want to encourage you to do that. If this is your first time here, make sure you fill out that connection card. You can find a hosting member, or you can put it in that box in the back. We donate $2 on your behalf. If it's your second time here, make sure you go get a t-shirt. There'll be hosting people in the back to do that as well. Hope to see you guys back on Friday at 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock. Thank you, guys.